Bruchim Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on the Pei Aleph Amud Beis, starting with the new Mishnah on the bottom, Pei Aleph Amud Aleph. The Mishnah continues to speak about Shitufei Mevuos and Erev Chatzeros, specifically in a scenario where one of the Bnei Chatzer gives money to a baker that lives together in the Chatzer, in order to then be koina a chelik of the pas. Subsequently, the baker is mezakeh through a shaliach the rest of the bnei chatzer. Does the one who gave the baker money, is he koina his chelik in the erev chatzeros or not? Says the Mishnah, noisein adam ma lechenvani v'lenachtoim. A person can give money to a chenvani in the case of shitufei mevois to acquire wine, for example, or to a baker to then acquire his chelik of the Erev Chatzeros, kedei sheyizke loy eruv, so that the storekeeper or the baker can acquire an eruv with them. And therefore, Div Rabbi Eliezer, this is valid by him giving money alone. V'chachamim oimrim loy zachu loy ma'osav. The Chachamim argue and say, no, the money does not work to affect a transaction. We say mos is einon koinois metaltalin. Money does not acquire movable objects, and therefore he does not get a chelik in the Erev Chatzeros by giving the money to the baker. On the top of Pei Aleph Amud Beis, at the top, umoidim b'shar kol ha'adam shezachu loy me'oisov. However, the Chachamim do agree with Rabbi Eliezer that in a scenario when he were to give his money to a balabayis, not a nachtoim or a chenvani, a simple balabayis who's not into commercial transactions, he doesn't have his own store, his own bakery, so there we say it does work. Gemara will explain, because over here he just wants the balabayis to make a transaction for him, for his benefit, and therefore he's happy for him to be zoicha on his behalf, even with a shaliach. It doesn't have to be with the money specifically. She'ein ma'arvin la'odam ela midaito. The Mishnah goes back to why it is that the nachtoim, it does not work, because the nachtoim, there, since it's the money specifically that he wants to make the transaction with, so therefore when he subsequently is mezakeh the rest of the Bnei Chatzer with a shaliach, so he does not include the one who gave him the money, because that person does not know, it's without his knowledge. He specifically wanted it to be acquired with this money that he gave him. The Mishnah continues, Omar Rabbi Yehuda states, Ba'med dvar mamurim, when is it so that the Chachamim who said their din earlier, that when there are new residents in the Chatzer or in the Mavui, that you have to then let them know if you're going to then include them in the Eruv. That's the Eruv Techumin. Rabbi Yehuda argues that's only with Eruv Techumin, because that would be a Choiv, meaning if you're going to go ahead and then include the new residents in the Eruv Techumin, let's say to the east, and therefore by putting the Eruv 2,000 amos to the east, so that will make it so they cannot go ahead and travel at all to the west. So that could be to their choiv, to their detriment. And they might not be wanting to do that. So therefore, on that, you'd have to let them know. But says Rabbi Yehuda, Ava be'eruv chatzeros, ma'arvin l'daito v'shalol l'daito. Whether the new residents know about it or they don't know about it, it would be fine to then include them in the erev chatzeros. Why? Because when it comes to a Erev Chatzeros, the Erev Chatzeros is a zechus. It's an objective benefit for the person you're going to include, and therefore that zechus makes it so you can go be and zachin la'adam shaloi b'fanav without his knowing about it. Whereas when it comes again to the Erev Tchumin, that's a choiv, and we say ein choivin la'adam ella shebefanav. Says the Gemara, what is the reason that Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah allows somebody in the chatzah to give money and acquire a chelik in the bread when he gives the money to the chenvoni. Ask the Gemara, my taimud de Rabbi Eliezer, what is his reasoning? Haloi mashach, behold, a meshicha, a kinyan meshicha was not made. In other words, even though midi araisa, mos is koinos, money does make an acquisition for metaltalin, but the chachamim said that that's not sufficient. You have to make a kinyan meshicha. That means that he'd have to then make a transaction other than taking the money. He'd have to then take, let's say, the pass, and he would have to then pull the pass or make a hagbah of the pass to transact it with the nachtoim. So says the Gemara, what's the reason why Rabbi Eliezer says it works here? To cause him to have a transaction and a chelik in the pass. Omer Rav Nachman or Rabbi Bar Avua, Asor Rabbi Eliezer kidei prokim bishana. Bedalid prokim bishana. Rabbi Eliezer goes like the Dalit Prokim. There are 4 different times of the year. For example, Erev Pesach and Erev Shavuos, where it states that when you give money, then the transaction with the kesef will then, yes, the metaltalin. As follows, this nan, Bedalit Prokim Elu, in these 4 different times, Mashchitin es hatabach bal korchoi. We can force the butcher to then shecht the animal. That means to say that when you bought a chelik in the animal, so therefore that money that you gave the butcher is enough to then acquire that meat. Afilu shor shava elef dinar ve'en lelokech ele dinar echad. Even if the shore is worth 1,000 dinar, and when he bought his chelik it was only with 1 dinar, that means only one small fraction of this animal, still that means he acquired this animal, this fraction of the animal, with the money. We can still force the butcher to shecht the animal. It could be that the butcher doesn't have other people to buy the rest of the meat and it'll be an expense to the butcher, but nonetheless, since the one who acquired that one chelek, that one a dinner worth of the meat, he acquired it already, so therefore it belongs to him. And he could force them before Yantif to shecht the meat, to shecht the animal. Lefikach imeis meis lelokech. Therefore, if the animal were to die before the butcher were to shecht him, then it would be a nevela, and that would be then a loss to the one who bought that part of the animal. That dinner is going to be now lost because it now was already acquired to him. Ask the Gemara, meis lelokeach. Why would the lokeach lose out if the animal dies and becomes a nevela? Haloi mashach. The lokeach did not make a kinyan meshicha, and we know that a kinyan meshicha is required when it comes to then acquiring metaltalin. Omar Rav Huna b'shem mashach. Rav Huna learns that in this Mishnah talking about he did make a kinyan meshicha. Ask the Gemara, ihochi ema seifa. If it's true that he made a meshicha, then how is that going to work out in the seif of this Mishnah? Bishar yemois hashana eino kain. It says in the rest of the year, then it's not going to be satisfactory. That means to say, it won't be the same din. Lefikach imeis meis lemoiche. If the animal were to die, the moiche will then have to absorb the expense. Amai, why not? Ha moshach. If indeed we're talking about a kinyan meshicha, like Rav Huna suggests, then the lokeach acquired that portion of the animal, and therefore, because of nevela, he should lose out. Omer Shmuel bar Yitzchok. Rather, you have to say la'olam ema, la'olam b'shel loy moshach. He did not make a kinyan meshicha. Hacha b'mayaskinom b'shezika loy ayidei acher. Rather, the butcher, he then gave the animal to somebody else to be zoicha on behalf of the one that was buying that chelik. And therefore, bedalet prakim elu dizach zechus loy. During these 4 times of the year, we consider it to be an objective zechus. V'zachin loy shaloy befonov. And therefore, he can acquire on that person, the one who purchased it on his behalf, as a zachin la'adam shaloy befonov. Why? Because people need meat for Yom Tif, and therefore it will be considered to be a zechus for him. Whereas the rest of the year, the chayvu loy ein chavin loy ella bifanav. The rest of the year, however, there, since it's an expenditure, we say it's a chayv, and therefore, indeed, if the animal were to die and become a nevela during the rest of the year, then the moiche will absorb the cost. Says the Gemara, Rav Eloi Omar Rabbi Yochanan, another suggestion to explain that Mishnah. B'dalit prokim eilu he'emidu chachamim divreim al divrei Torah. During 4 times of the year, says Rabbi Yochanan, that the chachamim, they stood up their words, the words of the Torah itself. And since the Torah says that most is koinos, by giving money, it does transact midyaraisa and acquire metaltalin. So the Chacham say we will then allow that transaction to take place and make it a good acquisition in the case of these 4 times of the year. The Rabbi Yochanan davar tar ma'os koinos. Really, midiraisa, money does make an acquisition. Ma omru meshicha koinos. So why did the Chacham step in and say normally that's not sufficient? You have to also make a meshicha in order to then acquire something. When a person buys an object, it's not good enough for him just to give the money. He has to then take the object in his hands and make a meshicha. Only then is he koine. Why? Why did the Chacham require that? Omar Rav, because Balabai. I'm sorry, I skipped. Because Gezeira says Rabbi Yochanan, because Gezeira Shema Yoimar Loi Nisrefu Chitecha Ba'aliyah. They were concerned that maybe there'll be a situation when there's a fire in an attic, and then the one who is the store owner, he will be lazy to put out the fire. Since already the object, the merchandise belongs to the one who gave him the money, so then he'll be lazy to put out the fire because it won't be at his loss. It'll be the loss of the one who purchased it. So therefore the Chacham said, no, make sure that the kinyan only takes place after Meshicha. Even though the one who bought it gave money, nonetheless, the store owner will be careful to take good care of that merchandise until it actually passes to the hands of the purchaser. The Gemara now brings the Mishnah, Umoidim Bishar Kol Ha'odam. However, the Chachamim do agree when it comes to the one who gives money to somebody in the Chatzar who is just a balabayis. He's not a chenvani, and he's not going to be a baker either. Why is that different? Explains the Gemara. Man shar kolim. Who is the other person that we're talking about? Omarav bal habayis. He's a simple person, meaning he's somebody who's looking to make a business. Why is that significant? Because over here, then we say that he says to him, use this money, and you can go ahead and make for me an acquisition. Whether it's with this money or not, I want you then acquire for me, even if it's going to be through a shaliach, I want you to make me a chelek in the Erev Chatzeros, in the Pas. V'chein Omar Shmuel Bal Habayis. The Omar Shmuel lo shonu ela nachtoim, aval Bal Habayis koine. He only said that the Mishnah is talking about when he gives the money to a nachtoim, a baker. Again, because then he wants that the baker use the money itself to make the acquisition. So therefore, we say Moses is not koinos. But the Chacham say, if you give money to a Bal Habayis, so essentially what you're saying is, I want to be part of the Erev Chatzeros. Whether it's with the money or if it's through another means, Ayidei Shaliach, that's also okay. V'omar Shmuel lo shanu ela mo aval kli koine. And Shmuel said, this is also true if somebody gave a kli to then go ahead and make an acquisition for the chelik in the bread of the Erev Chatzeros. In other words, he's saying, I'm going to give you a kli to make a kinyan, what's called a kinyan sudar, which works through chalipin. That means that I give you the kli, and then through you then picking up the kli, it's as if now you've transacted, in this case, a portion of the pas to me. So therefore that will work. It's only when it gives money is it a problem. And therefore what Rav Shmuel is talking about is when he talks about giving the chenvani or the nachtoim specifically money. But if they were give them a kli, then you can make a kinyan through chalipin. When he told the chenvani or the nachtoim zecheli, that means he's saying, with this money, acquire for me. So he's being specific. I only want this money to work. Aval Omar Arevli, then Shliach Shaviyeh V'Kani. But if he says, make an Eruv with me, with this money, then it's going to then transact, because essentially he's making him into a Shliach on his behalf. The Gemara now quotes the Mishnah that says, Amar Rav Yehuda Bamed Dvar Mamurim. Now, Rabbi Yehuda is being choylek lechora. He's coming to then comment on what's quoted in the Mishnah on Daf Pei Amud Beis, the first Mishnah on the top, where it states over there that when there are new diurin, when there are new residents in this chotzer, you have to then, even if you want to then come and be mezakeh them, moisif or mezakeh, you have to be modia, you have to let them know that they're going to be included in the Eruv. So Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says that's only true with Eruv Techumin, but not Eruv Chatzeros, because Eruv Chatzeros, bein ledaito, bein shelo ledaito, it's going to be working. Says the Gemara, Omar of Yehuda, Omar Shmuel, Halacha Karabi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, bein bedaito, bein shelo lemidaito. It's going to be effective in Eruv Chatzeros. V'loy oid, and he goes on to say, Ela kol makom sheshona Rabbi Yehuda be'eruvin halacha kamoisai. Wherever Rabbi Yehuda taught his din in Eruvin, the halacha is like him. Shmuel says, Omar le Rav Chana Bagadita le Rav Yehuda. Rav Chana from Baghdad, he says to Rav Yehuda, Omar Shmuel afilu b'mavui shenitlo karoisav ulechyav. Is that true even when you had a mavui that was adjusted by a kara, a crossbeam, or a lechi, a side post, and it was set in the beginning of Shabbos, and then in the middle of Shabbos they fell off? Are you going to say that the din is like Rabbi Yehuda, that's still valid? Because since on the onset of Shabbos it was effective, so too then, even though they fall off on Shabbos, it will continue to be valid? Omar le be'eruvin amarti loch v'lo b'mechitzois. I said the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel rather, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda in regards to Eruvin, the acquisition of Eruvin, but not in regards to Mechitzos. Omer l'Rav Acha b'rei d'Rav l'Rav Ashi halacha. Shmuel said the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, michlal, the pligi. That then implies that there's a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, "Kol makom she'omar Rabbi Yehuda eimosai uvameh b'mishnah seinu eino elu lefarish divrei chachamim v'lo pligi." When Rabbi Eliezer says the words eimosai, or he introduces his words by saying "Bamed dvar mamurim," he's coming to explain the Tanakama. So here too, over here, he said "Bamed dvar mamurim." So therefore, says Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, he's coming to explain the chachamim. I asked the Gemara, "V'ho anantnan nisvasu aleim moisiv u'mezake v'tzorch lodia." But the simple reading of the Mishnah implies differently. Implies that he's arguing, because it states in the Mishnah that the Chachamim said that when there are new diyarim, there are new residents of this chotzer, you can be moisiv u'mezake, you can add and you can go ahead and mezake on behalf of those residents, but v'tzorch lodia, you must let them know. And here we have Rabbi Yehuda arguing on that lachar, because Rabbi Yehuda is saying ben midaitoi, ben shaloi midaitoi. Answers the Gemara, hasam bechatzer shebein shnei muvois. The Mishnah before that the Chachamim said that tzarich lahodia is talking about when you have a chatzer that goes into two different muvois. There, it's going to be a choiv, perhaps on behalf of the new residents, because maybe they want to be enjoined to one chatzar, to one mavui, and not to the other mavui. If you enjoin them in one mavui by making a shituf mevois on their behalf to that mavui, then they're precluded from using the other mavui. So therefore, you have to let them know. On that, Rabbi Meir is not arguing. Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing on that. Rabbi Yehuda would agree. When does Rabbi Yehuda say his din? He's talking about when it's one mavui. Ask the Gemara, wait still. V'ha'amar Rav Shizbi Amar Chizda. Zois oimeres cholkin alav chaveir al Rabbi Yehuda. This means to say that the Chacham are arguing on Rabbi Yehuda, and the Gemara explained on the previous daf that's talking about when there was only one mavui. So you see clear that Rabbi Yehuda is choylek on the Chachamim. That Rabbi Yehuda says bein ledai shel midaito, even when there's only one mavui, and the Chachamim said dafka tzarich lahodia. Answers the Gemara, it's a machloikis amoroim. Ella on top of hey beis amar aleph gavra agavra karamis. You're going to be asking one Gavra, Shmuel, on another Gavra, on Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. There are two different opinions. Mar Sovar Pligi. Shmuel holds the halach is Rabbi Yehuda because he says that indeed they are arguing he is arguing on the Chachamim. Umar Sovar Lo Pligi. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that they are not arguing, and therefore there are two different Amoraim. Each one holds their own opinion.